I was lying in a hospital bed, still dizzy from the fall, when my daughter Lauren leaned over me with a soft smile and said, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll handle the paperwork." I trusted her, I always had. But as she signed page after page with her elegant silver pen, something felt too fast, too practiced. Then the nurse stepped closer, her hand brushing mine as she slipped a different pen into my palm. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Don't sign anything with hers." And in that moment, I realized I might not be the patient in that room. I might be the target. If this story already gives you chills, I'd love to hear where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Have you ever trusted someone and felt that quiet doubt creep in too late? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to follow this story with me, don't forget to like and subscribe. The morning it happened started like any other, which is probably why I didn't see it coming. I was standing in my kitchen barefoot on the cool tile waiting for the kettle to whistle. Sunlight filtered through the lace curtains I'd refused to replace for over 30 years, ever since Harold and I first moved into that house. It wasn't modern, and it certainly wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Ours. Every corner held a memory I wasn't ready to let go of. I remember reaching for the sugar jar when the room tilted. Not dramatically, not like in the movies where everything spins and crashes. It was quieter than that. Subtle. Like the floor had shifted just enough to make me question my balance. I grabbed the edge of the counter, but my hand slipped. The next thing I knew, I was sitting on the floor, my back against the cabinet, staring at the kettle still heating on the stove. I didn't lose consciousness. That's what I told myself later anyway. But I stayed there longer than I should have, long enough for fear to creep in. At 68, fear feels different. It's not sharp and immediate. It's slow, heavy. It whispers questions you don't want to answer. What if this is the beginning of the end? I managed to stand, eventually my knees trembling, and turned off the stove. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone. For a moment, I hesitated. I could have called my neighbor Doris. She was kind, always checking in, always ready with a casserole and conversation. But instead, I scrolled to Lauren's name. My daughter. It rang only once. "Mom." She answered immediately, her voice alert. Too alert for 9 a.m. I think I might need to go to the hospital," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I got dizzy. I fell, but I'm okay." I'm on my way," she cut in. "Don't move. I'll be there in 10 minutes. 10 minutes. I stared at the phone after the call ended, something uneasy settling in my chest. Lauren lived 25 minutes away. Even in perfect traffic, she couldn't make it in 10. But I brushed the thought aside. Maybe she was already nearby. Maybe I was overthinking. I've always been good at explaining things away, especially when it comes to my daughter. True to her word, or at least close enough, Lauren pulled into my driveway in just under 15 minutes. I watched from the window as she stepped out of the car, already on her phone, her expression tight and focused. She didn't even knock. She used the spare key. "Mom," she said as she rushed in, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. "What happened? I'm fine." I insisted, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. Just a little dizzy. Probably nothing. She didn't smile. Didn't relax. Instead, she took my arm, firmly guiding me toward the door. "We're not taking chances. Come on." There was something in her grip, something I couldn't quite name. It wasn't gentle concern. It was urgency. Control. "I can walk," I said quietly. "I know," she replied, but she didn't let go. The drive to the hospital was silent. Lauren kept one hand on the wheel and the other resting tensely near her phone as if she were waiting for it to ring. I watched her profile, searching for something familiar, something comforting, but all I saw was distance. Lauren hadn't always been like this. When she was little, she used to sit at the kitchen table with me while I graded papers, swinging her legs and asking endless questions about everything. She'd laugh easily, hug tightly, and tell me she never wanted to live anywhere but close to home. Somewhere along the way, that changed. After she married Kevin, things shifted faster. Conversations became shorter, visits less frequent. And when she did come by, there was always an edge to her questions. How much is the house worth now, Mom? Have you thought about downsizing? You know it's a lot to manage on your own at your age. At the time, I told myself she was just being practical, concerned. But sitting in that car watching her jaw tighten at a red light, I felt something colder. By the time we reached the hospital, Lauren had already switched into a different mode. Efficient. Assertive. She spoke before I could. My mother had a fall this morning, she told the nurse at the front desk. She's 68 lives alone and has been experiencing dizziness. We need her evaluated immediately. I opened my mouth to correct her, to explain that it wasn't quite that serious, but the nurse was already typing. Name, she asked. Esther Barrett, Lauren answered for me. I forced a small smile. I can speak for myself, sweetheart. Lauren glanced at me, her expression softening just a fraction. Of course you can, Mom. I'm just helping speed things up. Speed things up. That phrase echoed in my mind as we were led to a waiting area. Lauren stayed close, hovering, answering questions before they were fully asked. Yes, she lives alone. Yes, she's had a few minor balance issues before. No, I haven't. I wanted to say. Not really. Not like this. But each time I tried to speak, Lauren would gently interrupt, her tone smooth and convincing. I began to feel like a passenger in my own life. After what felt like an hour, but was probably closer to 20 minutes, we were moved to a private room. A nurse came in to check my vitals, asking me simple questions. This time I made sure to answer. My name is Esther Barrett. I'm 68. I had a brief dizzy spell this morning, but I did not lose consciousness. The nurse nodded, making notes. Her eyes flicked briefly to Lauren, then back to me. There was something observant in her gaze, something careful. I'm Marlene, she said. I'll be helping take care of you today. Her voice was calm, grounded. I liked her immediately. Lauren, meanwhile, had already begun pulling documents out of her bag, a thick folder, too thick for a simple hospital visit. I'll take care of the paperwork, she said, flashing me a reassuring smile. You just focus on resting. I watched as she spread the papers across the small table beside my bed, her movements practiced, efficient, prepared. Too prepared. Lauren, I said slowly. What exactly are you signing? Just admission forms, she replied without looking up. Consent forms. Insurance. The usual. She picked up a sleek silver pen from her purse, the kind you'd see in a jewelry store display, and began signing with quick, fluid strokes. Page after page. My eyes drifted to the stack. There were too many. Shouldn't I be reading those, I asked. She paused just long enough to glance at me. Mom, you're not feeling well. We don't want to overwhelm you. I've got it. Her tone was gentle, reassuring, final. I swallowed, a small knot forming in my stomach. Across the room, Marlene stood quietly observing. Her eyes moved from Lauren's hands to the pen, and then to me. She didn't say anything, but something in her expression shifted. And for the first time since I'd arrived, I felt it clearly not just unease, but something sharper. A warning. I didn't know it yet, but that moment, the way Marlene looked at that pen was the beginning of everything. If there's one thing you learn after a certain age, it's this. Your instincts don't shout, they whisper. And if you ignore them long enough, they stop trying. I had ignored mine for months. But that morning in that hospital room watching my daughter sign papers, I hadn't read with a pen that gleamed too elegantly for something so ordinary. That whisper came back. And this time I listened. Lauren didn't stop moving. She flipped pages quickly, barely pausing between signatures, her silver pen gliding across each line as if she'd practiced the motion before. Every now and then she'd turn a document slightly toward me. "Just initial here, Mom," she said casually, tapping a blank space without giving me time to read the heading. I leaned forward slightly, squinting at the fine print. "This doesn't look like admission paperwork," I murmured. "It is," she replied immediately. Too immediately. "They just updated their forms recently." I hesitated. That whisper again. Something wasn't right. "I'd feel better reading them," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Lauren let out a soft sigh, not irritated, but something close to it. "Mom, you're tired. Let me handle this. It's routine." Routine. That word didn't match the thickness of the stack in front of her. Before I could respond, Marlene stepped closer. "I actually need to check your blood pressure again," she said gently, her tone professional but firm. Lauren looked up just slightly annoyed. "She just had it checked." "I know," Marlene said with a small smile. "Doctor's request." It wasn't. I could tell, but I said nothing. Lauren reluctantly stepped aside, gathering the papers into a neat pile, though her hand lingered protectively over them as if afraid they might be taken away. Marlene moved to my side, wrapping the cuff around my arm with careful hands. As she adjusted the Velcro, she leaned in just enough that only I could hear her. "Take your time," she whispered. I stilled. She straightened quickly, pressing the button on the machine as if nothing had happened. The cuff tightened around my arm, squeezing steadily. I kept my eyes forward, but my thoughts began to race. "Take your time." It sounded simple, harmless, but in that moment it felt like a message, a warning wrapped in kindness. Lauren shifted impatiently nearby. "How long is this going to take?" she asked. "Just a moment," Marlene replied. The machine beeped softly. Marlene noted the numbers, then turned back to me. "All set," she said, removing the cuff. Then louder for Lauren to hear, "You might want to let her rest a bit before continuing. She's still a little unstable." Lauren hesitated, and for the first time she looked uncertain. It was subtle, but I saw it. "Fine," she said, finally exhaling. "We'll take a break." She gathered the documents again, stacking them neatly, but instead of putting them away, she placed them on the table within reach. 2 within reach. "I'm just going to step out and call Kevin," she added. "Don't go anywhere, Mom." The irony of that statement almost made me smile. The door closed behind her. Silence settled into the room. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Marlene moved quickly. She stepped to the table, her movements efficient but quiet, and picked up the top sheet of paper. Her eyes scanned it rapidly, her expression tightening. "What is it?" I asked softly. She looked at me, really looked this time. "Mrs. Barrett," she said carefully. "These are not standard hospital forms." My chest tightened. "I thought so," I whispered. She flipped through the pages, her brows knitting together. "Some of these, they're legal documents, authorization forms, financial access." She paused, then lowered her voice even further. There's language here that could give someone temporary control over your assets. My stomach dropped. Control, I repeated. Marlene nodded slightly. If signed properly, yes. I stared at the papers, my hands suddenly cold. She said they were just for admission. I said, my voice barely steady. I know, Marlene replied gently. She placed the papers back exactly as they had been, careful not to disturb their order. Listen to me, she said, her tone shifting firmer now. You do not sign anything you don't fully understand. Not here, not anywhere. I wasn't going to. I said, though a part of me knew that wasn't entirely true. I might have. If she hadn't spoken up, Marleanne reached into her pocket and pulled out a simple black pen. Nothing fancy, just a standard hospital-issued one. She pressed it lightly into my hand. If she asks you to sign something, she said quietly, use this instead of hers. I frowned slightly. Why does that matter? Marlene hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Then she said, because sometimes the tool matters more than the signature. I didn't fully understand, but I felt the weight of it. Before I could ask more, the door handle turned. Marlene stepped back instantly, her expression returning to neutral as Lauren walked in, phone in hand. Kevin's on his way, she said, slipping her phone into her purse. Her eyes flicked briefly between us. Everything okay? Everything's fine, Marlene replied smoothly. Just making sure your mother is comfortable. Lauren nodded, though her gaze lingered just a moment too long. Then she smiled again, that same soft, reassuring smile. Ready to finish up, she asked, picking up her silver pen once more. I looked down at the black pen in my hand, then back at her, and for the first time I didn't feel like her mother. I felt like someone she was trying to convince. Actually, I said slowly, I think I'd like to read them first. The smile didn't disappear, but it changed. Just slightly, and in that tiny shift, I saw something I hadn't wanted to see before. Not concern, not care, but calculation. Lauren didn't argue right away. That more than anything made my stomach tighten. For a brief second, she simply stood there, her silver pen poised above the paper, her eyes studying me, not as a daughter looks at her mother, but as someone recalculating a plan that had just shifted. Then the smile returned, soft, controlled. Of course, Mom, she said lightly. If that makes you feel better. She turned the top page toward me, smoothing it flat with the palm of her hand. It's just standard language. You don't have to worry. But now I did. I adjusted myself in the bed, my fingers curling slightly around the black pen Marlene had given me. It felt heavier than it should have. Or maybe that was just the weight of what I was beginning to understand. I lowered my eyes to the paper. The first few lines looked harmless enough. Hospital name, patient identification, consent to treatment. But then the language shifted. Subtly at first, then unmistakably. Authorization to designate a temporary financial proxy. My breath caught. I blinked and read the line again, slower this time. In the event the patient is deemed unable to make informed decisions, I could feel Lauren watching me. I kept my face still. What does this part mean? I asked, tapping the line gently. Oh, that she said quickly. That's just in case you're under medication or something. It lets me help manage things temporarily. Bills, insurance? Nothing major? Nothing major. The words echoed hollowly in my mind. Why would that be necessary? I asked. Lauren shrugged, her tone still casual. It's just a precaution. Hospitals do it all the time now. It's for your protection. My protection. I felt something inside me shift. Not a sharp break, but a quiet, steady realignment. I moved to the next page. More language. More phrases that sounded official but felt wrong. Granting access to financial accounts for continuity of care. Authorization to coordinate property-related decisions. Property. My house. I swallowed slowly. Lauren, I said, keeping my voice even. Why is there mention of property decisions in hospital paperwork? For the first time, she hesitated. Only for a second. But it was enough. It's probably just part of a larger template, she said, waving her hand slightly. They include everything to cover liability. You know how legal stuff is. I did know how legal stuff was. I had spent years helping my husband review contracts for his small business. I wasn't a lawyer, but I wasn't naive either. And this wasn't standard. I turned another page. At the bottom, a signature line. My name typed neatly beneath it. Waiting, Lauren stepped closer. You don't have to read every word, Mom, she said gently. That's why I'm here, to make things easier for you. Easier. I looked up at her. Really looked this time. Her posture was relaxed, but her shoulders were just slightly tense. Her eyes held mine, but there was something behind them now, something guarded, something I hadn't seen before. Or maybe I just hadn't wanted to. I think I do want to read every word, I said quietly. The air in the room shifted. Lauren's smile didn't disappear, but it thinned. You're overthinking this, she said. Maybe I replied. But I'd rather overthink than regret. Silence settled between us. Then she exhaled softly and stepped back, crossing her arms. Fine, she said. Take your time. The words sounded patient, but the tone didn't. I lowered my gaze again, continuing through the documents more carefully now. Each paragraph seemed to confirm what Marlene had warned me about. This wasn't just about hospital consent. This was about control, temporary perhaps, but control all the same, and once given, not always easy to take back. A faint murmur drifted in from the hallway. Voices, footsteps, a cart rolling past. Ordinary hospital sounds, but inside that room everything felt anything but ordinary. I reached the final page, another signature line, another blank space waiting for me to surrender something I hadn't agreed to give. Lauren uncapped her silver pen again, holding it out toward me. Here, she said softly. Just sign at the bottom. I didn't take it. Instead, I glanced down at my own hand, at the simple black pen resting in my fingers. Marlene's pen? I remembered her words. The tool matters more than the signature. I didn't fully understand why, but I trusted the instinct behind it. I'll use mine, I said. Lauren's hand froze in midair. It doesn't matter which pen you use, she said a little too quickly. Then it shouldn't be a problem, I replied. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then slowly she lowered her hand. Of course, she said, though her voice had lost its softness. I positioned the paper on my lap, the pen hovering just above the line, and then I stopped. Something else caught my eye. A smaller paragraph just above the signature, printed in tighter, denser text. I leaned in, reading carefully. Authorization remains in effect until formally revoked or legally contested. My heart skipped. Until legally contested, I looked up. Lauren. I said, my voice quieter now, but firmer. Why would I need to legally contest something like this? She didn't answer immediately, and in that silence, everything became clear. Too clear. It's just standard phrasing, she said finally. You're reading too much into it. No, I wasn't. I felt it now deep in my chest. That whisper from earlier had grown into something undeniable. This wasn't about helping me. This was about taking something from me. Carefully, legally, quietly. I set the pen down. "I'm not signing this," I said. The words hung in the air, heavy, final. Lauren's expression didn't change right away, but her eyes did. The warmth disappeared, replaced by something colder, something sharper. "Mom," she said slowly, "you don't understand how important this is." "I understand enough," I replied. Her jaw tightened. "You could make things very difficult if you refuse," she continued, her tone no longer gentle. "For everyone." There it was. Not concern, not love. Pressure. I felt a flicker of fear, but it didn't take hold. "Not this time." "I think things are already difficult," I said quietly. The door opened behind her. Marlene stepped back into the room, her presence steady grounding. She glanced between us, taking in the tension instantly. "Everything all right in here?" she asked. Lauren turned slightly, her smile snapping back into place, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We're just finishing up," she said. Marlene's gaze shifted to me. I met her eyes and gave the smallest shake of my head. "No, we weren't finishing anything. Not today." Marlene didn't react immediately to my small shake of the head, but I saw the change in her eyes. A quiet understanding, the kind that doesn't need words. She stepped further into the room, her posture calm but purposeful. "Mrs. Barrett," she said gently, "I need to run one more routine check. It won't take long." Lauren let out a quiet breath that sounded dangerously close to frustration. "We've already done multiple checks." "She's fine." "I understand," Marlene replied, still composed. "This one is required before the doctor comes in." There was a firmness beneath her politeness now. Lauren hesitated. For just a moment, it looked like she might push back, but then she stepped aside again, her arms folding tightly across her chest. "Fine," she said. Marlene approached my bed, pulling the curtains slightly, not enough to block the room, but enough to create a small sense of privacy. Her movements were precise, practiced. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper only I could hear. "You did the right thing." I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "What happens now?" I whispered back. Her expression softened, but her tone remained serious. "Now we slow everything down." I nodded faintly. That word again. Slow. It was the opposite of everything Lauren had been trying to do. Marlene straightened and picked up the papers from the table, flipping through them with more obvious attention this time. "These forms," she said aloud, directing her voice toward Lauren, "aren't part of our standard admission packet." Lauren's head snapped up. What Marlene didn't look at her right away. She continued scanning the pages, her brows knitting slightly. "I'm not seeing our hospital formatting," she added calmly. "No internal coding, no department headers." Lauren took a step forward. "They're supplemental forms. I brought them to help manage my mother's care." Marlene finally looked up. "Supplemental." She repeated, her tone neutral but probing. From which department? Lauren opened her mouth, then closed it. They were provided by a consultant," she said after a beat. "For elder care planning." Something in the way she said it, too rehearsed, too vague, made the air in the room feel heavier. Marlene nodded slowly, as if considering that. "I see," she said. Then she turned slightly toward me. "Mrs. Barrett, did someone explain these documents to you in full before presenting them for signature?" "No," I said quietly. "They were described as standard hospital forms." Lauren exhaled sharply. Mom, that's not fair. I told you they were just... You told me they were routine. I interrupted, my voice still calm but firmer now. You didn't tell me they could give you control over my finances. Silence. Lauren's expression shifted again. The softness was gone now. Completely. Temporary control. She corrected, her voice tightening. Only if necessary. Necessary for whom, I asked. Her eyes flashed. For your safety, she said. Marlene stepped in before the tension could escalate further. I'm going to need to escalate this, she said evenly. Any document involving financial authorization must be reviewed by our patient advocacy team if it's being introduced during care. Lauren's posture stiffened. That's not necessary. It is, Marlene replied simply. The authority in her voice left little room for argument. Lauren glanced between us, her composure starting to crack at the edges. This is ridiculous, she muttered. I'm her daughter. I'm trying to help her. No one is questioning your relationship, Marlene said calmly, but we are responsible for ensuring informed consent. Informed consent. The phrase echoed in my mind like a lifeline. Lauren turned back to me, her expression shifting once more, this time softer, pleading. Mom, she said, stepping closer. You know I would never hurt you. For a second, just a second, I felt the pull of that old instinct, the instinct to believe her, to trust her. But then I remembered the line on the paper, until legally contested, and the way she had rushed me, the way she had avoided my questions, the way she had said once she signs. I don't know that anymore, I said quietly. The words landed harder than I expected. Lauren froze. Truly froze this time. Her face went still, her eyes searching mine as if trying to find the version of me that would have said something different. But that version wasn't here anymore. Marlene gently placed the stack of documents back on the table. I'm going to contact our social worker, she said, and legal liaison. We'll review everything properly. Lauren's head snapped toward her. You're blowing this out of proportion. Am I? Marlene asked calmly. Another silence. Thicker this time. Then, as if grasping for control, Lauren reached for her bag and pulled out her silver pen again. She turned it slowly between her fingers, the metal catching the light. You're all acting like this is some kind of scheme, she said, her voice lower now. It's just paperwork. My eyes followed the pen. Something about it still bothered me, more than it should have. Marlene? I said suddenly, can I ask you something? Of course. That pen, I said, nodding toward Lauren's hand. Why did you tell me not to use it? Lauren's grip tightened slightly. It's just a pen, she said quickly. But Marlene didn't answer right away. She stepped closer, her gaze fixed on the silver pen. May I see it? She asked. Lauren hesitated, just for a moment. Then she forced a small smile and held it out. Be my guest. Marlene took it carefully, turning it in her hand. At first glance, it looked expensive. Elegant. The kind of thing you'd give as a gift. But Marlene's expression darkened slightly as she examined the tip. This isn't standard ink, she said quietly. Lauren laughed lightly. It's just a premium pen. Marlene didn't respond. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small notepad. She pressed the pen to the paper and wrote a short line. The ink appeared clearly. Dark. Smooth. But then after a few seconds it began to fade. My breath caught. The line grew lighter and lighter until it was barely visible. What? I whispered. Marlene looked up. This type of ink can degrade or be altered, she said. In some cases, it can be manipulated when documents are copied or scanned. The room went completely still. I turned slowly to Lauren. Her face had gone pale. "That's not what it's for," she said quickly. "It's just—" "Then why use it here?" Marlene asked. Lauren didn't answer. She couldn't, because now there was no simple explanation left. I felt something inside me settle. Not fear, not confusion, but clarity. Cold, steady, unshakable. "You weren't just trying to help me," I said softly. Lauren's eyes flickered. "You were trying to make sure I couldn't prove what I signed." The words hung in the air, and this time, she didn't deny it. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything I had ever experienced. Not the kind of silence that comes from peace, but the kind that comes when the truth finally steps into the room, and no one can pretend not to see it anymore. Lauren didn't speak. She stood there, her hand still slightly extended from where she had offered the pen, her fingers now curling slowly inward, as if she wished she could take the moment back. Kevin wasn't there yet, but somehow I could already feel his presence in everything she had done. Careful, calculated, prepared. Marlene placed the silver pen gently on the table, as if it were something fragile or dangerous. "I'm going to document this," she said quietly. Lauren snapped back to herself. "No, you're not," she said quickly, her voice sharp now. "That's completely unnecessary." Marlene didn't flinch. "It is necessary," she replied evenly. "Any concern involving patient consent and potential financial exploitation must be reported." The word exploitation landed like a stone in the center of the room. Lauren's jaw tightened. "This is ridiculous," she said, turning toward me again. "Mom, say something." "You know this isn't what it looks like." I looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time in my life, I allowed myself to see her without the filter of motherhood, without the automatic forgiveness, without the instinct to protect her from consequences. What I saw wasn't the little girl who used to sit at my kitchen table. It was a woman who had made choices. "I don't know what it looks like anymore," I said quietly, "but I know what it feels like." Lauren's expression cracked. "Mom, it feels like I was being rushed." I continued, my voice steady but low. "It feels like I wasn't being told the truth, and it feels like you were trying to get me to sign something I didn't understand." Her eyes filled not with tears but with frustration. "You're overreacting," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm finally reacting." That seemed to hit her harder than anything else. For a moment she didn't speak. Then she turned away, pacing once across the room, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. "You don't understand what we're dealing with," she said, her voice tight. "Kevin and we've been under pressure. A lot of pressure." There it was, the first crack in the story. "What kind of pressure?" I asked. She hesitated. Marlene remained still, watching closely but saying nothing. Lauren exhaled slowly, running a hand through her hair. "Financial," she admitted. "Things didn't go the way we planned. What things I pressed gently. Our investment," she said. "The business Kevin started, it didn't work out." I nodded slowly. I had heard about that business. A vague explanation months ago. Something about a logistics startup. She had brushed it off quickly when I asked questions. "We lost more than we expected," she continued, "and then there were loans. Interest. It just snowballed." Her voice softened slightly. "More human now. More real." "And you thought this was the solution?" I asked. She looked at me again. This was a way to stabilize things, she said. "Temporarily. We weren't trying to take anything from you. Control is taking something, I said quietly. It would have been temporary, she insisted. Just until we got back on our feet. And what would have happened if you didn't? I asked. She didn't answer. Because we both knew. Temporary has a way of becoming permanent when money is involved, especially when control has already been handed over. I glanced at the papers again, at the language, at the clauses. Would I have even known, I asked softly, if I hadn't read this carefully, would I have known what I signed Lauren's silence was answer enough? My chest tightened, but I didn't look away. Mom, we were going to tell you, she said finally. Just not all at once. You would have panicked. I wouldn't have panicked, I replied. I would have asked questions. Exactly, she said almost sharply. And we didn't have time for that. There it was again, that urgency, that need to move fast, to do what I asked. Before I could stop you, her eyes flickered. Before things got worse, she said. For you, I replied. She didn't argue. The truth had settled too deeply now. Marlene stepped forward slightly. Mrs. Barrett, she said gently, I've contacted the patient advocate team. They'll be here shortly. Lauren turned toward her again, frustration flaring. You didn't need to do that, she said. Yes, I did, Marlene replied calmly. Lauren let out a sharp breath, then looked back at me. So that's it, she said. You're just going to assume the worst about your own daughter. I felt something inside me shift again. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter, something steadier. I'm not assuming anything I said. I'm responding to what I've seen. And what have you seen? She challenged. I met her gaze. I've seen you try to rush me into signing documents you didn't explain, I said. I've seen you use a pen that makes signatures unreliable, and I've heard you talk about controlling my assets. Her face went pale again. You heard that, she asked. I nodded. In the hallway, I said, You said once I signed, everything would be under your control. Lauren closed her eyes briefly. For a moment she looked tired, worn down. But that didn't erase what had happened. That wasn't what I meant, she said quietly. Then what did you mean, I asked. She didn't answer. Because now, there were no words left that could make it sound harmless. The door opened again. This time it wasn't Marlene. A man stepped in. Tall, confident, familiar. Kevin. He stopped when he saw the tension in the room. What's going on? He asked, his eyes moving quickly between us. Lauren turned toward him immediately. They're making this into something it's not, she said. Mom is refusing to sign the forms. Kevin's expression shifted, subtly. But I saw it. Not concern. Calculation. He stepped closer, his tone smooth. Esther, he said, using my name in that overly polite way he always had. We're just trying to help you. You know that. I didn't respond right away. I studied him, the man my daughter had chosen, the man who had helped shape this plan. Help doesn't come with hidden clauses, I said finally. His smile tightened. They're not hidden, he said. They're just standard legal language. I almost smiled at that. Almost. I've lived long enough to know the difference, I replied. Kevin's eyes flickered, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty. Real uncertainty. Because whatever they had expected today, it wasn't this. Kevin closed the door behind him with a quiet click, as if sealing the room off from the rest of the world. For a moment no one spoke. The air felt thick, charged with something that could tip in any direction. He took a step closer to my bed, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt like he was preparing for a negotiation rather than a visit to a hospital room. "Let's all just calm down," he said, his voice smooth, practiced. "This doesn't need to turn into a bigger issue than it already is." Marlene didn't move, but I could feel her presence beside me, steady, alert. "I think it already is a big issue," I replied quietly. Kevin's smile didn't falter, but it changed. Less warmth, more calculation. "Esther," he said again, lowering his voice as if speaking gently would make his words easier to accept. "You've been under stress. You had a fall this morning. It's understandable that things might feel confusing." There it was, the first attempt. Subtle, strategic. "I'm not confused," I said. He tilted his head slightly. "Of course, I didn't mean that in a negative way. Just that sometimes when we're not feeling well, it's helpful to let family step in temporarily." "Temporarily," I repeated. Lauren shifted beside him, her arms still folded, her expression tight. "That's all this is," she added quickly. "A temporary safeguard." For whom I asked again. Neither of them answered. Kevin exhaled slowly, then glanced at the papers on the table. His eyes lingered on them for just a fraction too long. "Look," he said, his tone shifting slightly less soft now, more direct. "We've already spoken to a consultant about this. These documents are completely legitimate. You'd be protected. Protected from what I asked. From making decisions that could hurt you financially," he said. I almost laughed. "Like signing something I don't understand?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant I said." The tension in the room rose another degree. Kevin stepped closer, lowering his voice further. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I met his gaze. "No," I said. "I'm making it slower." His eyes flickered just slightly. And I knew. That was the one thing they hadn't planned for. Time. They needed me rushed, confused, compliant. And now that I wasn't any of those things, their plan was slipping. Lauren let out a frustrated breath. "We don't have time for this," she said. "Things are already getting worse." "What things?" I asked. She hesitated. Kevin glanced at her quick, sharp. A silent exchange passed between them, the kind that happens when two people are deciding what to reveal and what to keep hidden. Finally, Lauren spoke. "The loan," she said, quietly. Kevin's head snapped toward her. "Lauren." "No," she said, cutting him off. "She already knows something's wrong. We can't keep pretending." I felt my chest tighten. "What loan?" I asked. Lauren swallowed her gaze, dropping briefly before returning to mine. "The business didn't just fail," she said. "We owe money. A lot of money." "How much?" I asked. She hesitated again. Kevin answered this time. "Enough that we need to stabilize things quickly," he said. That wasn't an answer. "That's not a number," I said. His expression hardened slightly. "It's complicated. It's my life you're trying to sign over," I replied. "I think I deserve a number." Silence. Then finally, 280,000, Lauren said. The room seemed to tilt again, but this time I didn't fall. I stayed steady. "How did it get that far?" I asked. She let out a shaky breath. "Interest. Extensions. We kept thinking we could recover it. And when you couldn't," I said slowly, "you decided to use me." "No," she said quickly. "We decided to protect you. By taking control of everything I own," I asked. Her voice faltered. "Temporarily." "Stop saying that," I interrupted softly. Temporary doesn't mean harmless. Kevin stepped in again, his tone sharper now. We weren't going to take anything from you, he said. We were going to manage it. That's different. Without my informed consent, I said. He didn't respond. Because there was no way to make that sound acceptable, Marlene shifted slightly beside me. I've contacted legal liaison, she said calmly. They'll be here shortly as well. Kevin's eyes narrowed. This is getting out of hand, he said. There's no need to involve legal teams over a family matter. It stopped being just a family matter when legal documents were introduced under unclear circumstances, Marlene replied. Lauren turned to me again, her expression softening, but now it felt desperate rather than reassuring. Mom, she said, stepping closer, we were going to fix this. You know, we always figure things out. I looked at her, and for a moment I saw something real. Fear. Not for me, for herself. For you, I said quietly. She flinched. For us? She corrected. I shook my head gently. If this was for us, you would have told me the truth from the beginning. Her eyes filled not with tears, but with something heavier. Regret. But regret doesn't undo intention. Kevin exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. We don't have the luxury of time, he said. If we don't act soon, things escalate. Escalate how I asked. He hesitated, then said, legal action. Collection. Possibly worse. A chill ran through me, and you thought the solution was to make me legally responsible, I asked. That's exactly what it is, I said. Silence again. Then Lauren spoke, her voice quieter now. We didn't see another way. I studied her face, the lines of stress, the exhaustion, the fear, all real, but beneath it, something else had been there earlier. Willingness to cross a line. I would have helped you, I said softly. Her eyes snapped to mine. What she whispered. I would have helped you, I repeated. If you had come to me honestly. Her lips parted slightly. But you didn't trust me with the truth. I continued. So why should I trust you with everything I have? That question hung between us. Unanswered. Unanswerable. The door opened again. This time it wasn't Kevin. It was a man I hadn't seen in years but recognized immediately. Esther, he said, stepping into the room, his presence calm but authoritative. Daniel Carter, my late husband's lawyer. And suddenly, for the first time since this began, I felt something I hadn't felt all day. Not fear, not confusion, but certainty. Because whatever came next, I wasn't facing it alone. Daniel Carter closed the door gently behind him, his eyes moving across the room in one calm, measured sweep. He didn't rush. He didn't raise his voice. But the moment he stepped in, something shifted. Kevin straightened slightly. Lauren went still. Authority has a way of doing that, Esther Daniel said again, stepping closer to my bed. His voice was warm, familiar. Grounding. I came as quickly as I could. I'm glad you did, I said quietly. He gave me a small nod, then turned his attention to the others. And you must be Lauren, he said politely. And Kevin. Neither of them responded right away. Kevin recovered first. Yes, he said, extending a hand that Daniel didn't immediately take. We weren't expecting I wasn't invited, Daniel replied evenly. I was called. Marlene stood slightly to the side, arms relaxed but eyes alert. I contacted him, she said simply. Lauren's jaw tightened. This is unnecessary, she said. We were handling everything. Daniel finally accepted Kevin's handshake, but only briefly. I'm sure you believe that, he said, but when legal documents are involved, especially ones affecting financial authority, clarity matters. His gaze shifted to the stack of papers on the table. May I? He asked. No one answered. He took that as permission. Daniel picked up the top document and began reading, his expression unreadable at first. The room remained silent except for the faint rustle of paper as he turned each page. Kevin crossed his arms. Lauren stared at the floor. I watched Daniel's face, and then I saw it. A tightening around his eyes. A slight narrowing. Recognition. He flipped another page. Then another. Finally, he lowered the stack. These are not standard hospital forms, he said. I already said that, Marlene added quietly. Daniel nodded once in acknowledgement, then continued. These are third-party authorization documents. Some of them reference temporary financial control. Others? Go further. Lauren looked up quickly. They're legal safeguards. Daniel turned to her. No, he said calmly. They're conditional power transfers. The words landed like a verdict. Kevin stepped forward. That's an exaggeration. Daniel didn't raise his voice. It's not, he replied. If signed, these documents could grant you the ability to access, manage, and potentially liquidate certain assets under the justification of care management. My chest tightened. Even hearing it stated so plainly, it felt unreal. Lauren shook her head. That's not what we intended. Intent doesn't change language, Daniel said. Silence. He placed the documents back on the table, aligning them carefully. Mrs. Barrett, he said, turning to me again. Have you signed any of these? No, I said. I was about to... Before Marlene stopped me. Daniel glanced at her briefly, then back at me. Good, he said. Very good. Lauren let out a sharp breath. You're making it sound like we were trying to steal from her. Daniel looked at her steadily. I'm saying the documents are structured in a way that could allow that, he replied, and that presenting them under the context of hospital admission is deeply concerning. Kevin's patience snapped. This is ridiculous, he said. We were trying to protect her. She's alone. She had a fall. What if something worse happens next time? That concern is valid, Daniel said calmly. The method you chose is not. Kevin clenched his jaw. You don't understand the situation we're in, he said. I understand more than you think, Daniel replied. The room fell quiet again. Then Lauren spoke, her voice lower now. We're in debt, she said. We needed a way to stabilize things before it got out of control. Daniel didn't react immediately. How much, he asked. Kevin hesitated. Lauren answered. 280,000. Daniel nodded once as if filing the information away. And you believed obtaining temporary control over your mother's finances would solve that. It would have bought us time, Kevin said. At her expense, Daniel replied. Temporarily, Kevin insisted. Daniel's gaze sharpened slightly. There's that word again, he said. Temporary. He paused. Do you know how many legal disputes I've handled where temporary arrangements became permanent losses? Kevin didn't answer. Lauren looked away. Daniel continued, his tone still calm but now unmistakably firm. Temporary authority once granted creates a legal foothold, especially if the person granting it is later questioned in terms of capacity. A chill ran through me. That's why there's a language about legal contest. Isn't there? I asked. Daniel looked at me. Yes, he said. That clause protects the holder of authority more than the signer. I closed my eyes briefly. Everything was aligning now. Every instinct, every hesitation, every whispered warning. Lauren's voice broke through. "That's not how we meant it," she said again, softer this time. Daniel turned to her. "I believe that you may not have fully understood the implications," he said, "but you were willing to act on them. That was harder to argue with." Kevin stepped forward again, his tone shifting less defensive, now more urgent. "So what now?" he asked. "We're just supposed to walk away and let everything collapse." Daniel held his gaze. "No," he said. "You're supposed to deal with your situation honestly." Kevin scoffed. "And how do you suggest we do that by not involving your mother's assets without her informed and voluntary consent?" Daniel replied. Lauren looked at me again. This time there was no performance, no softness, just raw emotion. "We didn't know what else to do," she said quietly. I studied her face, the fear, the exhaustion, the desperation, all real. But so was the choice she had made. "You could have told me the truth," I said. She swallowed. "I was afraid you'd say no." I nodded slowly. "Then at least it would have been my choice," I replied. That seemed to hit her harder than anything else, because now there was no argument left, only consequence. Marlene stepped forward slightly. "The patient advocate team is on their way," she said. "They'll review everything and make sure Mrs. Barrett's rights are protected." Kevin exhaled sharply. "This is turning into a legal circus," he muttered. Daniel didn't respond. He simply placed a hand gently on the side of my bed. "You're in control here, Esther," he said quietly. "No one can take that from you unless you give it to them." I nodded, and for the first time since this began, I believed it. Lauren stood very still. Then slowly she stepped back, not in surrender, but in realization, because whatever plan they had walked in with, it wasn't going to work anymore, and they knew it. The room didn't erupt into chaos the way you might expect. No shouting, no dramatic accusations. Instead, everything slowed, and in that stillness the truth had nowhere left to hide. Lauren stood near the window now, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, as if she were trying to hold something together that had already begun to fall apart. Kevin remained closer to the table, his eyes flicking between Daniel, the papers, and me, as though calculating angles, searching for something he could still salvage. But there was nothing left to salvage. Not in the way they had planned. Marlene stepped out briefly to speak with someone in the hallway. When she returned, she wasn't alone. A woman followed her in mid-40s, composed with a folder tucked neatly under her arm. Her presence was calm but firm, the kind that didn't demand attention but commanded it anyway. "Mrs. Barrett," she said, offering a small, reassuring smile. "I'm Rebecca Sloan, the hospital's patient advocate." I nodded. "Thank you for coming." She stepped closer, her gaze attentive but not intrusive. "I understand there are some concerns regarding documentation presented to you today," she said. "That's correct," Daniel answered before I could. "I've reviewed the documents. They are not part of the hospital's standard intake process and contain clauses that could grant financial authority under certain conditions." Rebecca nodded once, as if she had expected as much. "All right," she said. "Let's take this one step at a time." She turned slightly toward me. "Mrs. Barrett, I need to ask you directly. Have you signed any documents today that you did not fully understand?" "No," I said. "I was about to," but I stopped. Her expression softened just slightly. "Good," she said. "That was the right decision." Lauren shifted behind her. "Can we not make this sound like some kind of crisis?" she said, her voice tight. "These were just precautionary forms." Rebecca turned to her. her tone still calm but now more precise. Precautionary forms do not typically include clauses related to financial authority or property management, she said, especially not in a hospital admission context. Kevin stepped in. They were supplemental, he said. We brought them in ourselves. Rebecca's eyes met his. That introduces an additional concern, she replied. Presenting external legal documents during a medical intake without clear explanation can create confusion about their purpose and urgency. Kevin opened his mouth to respond, but Daniel spoke first. It also raises questions about informed consent, he added. The phrase landed firmly. Lauren's composure cracked again just slightly. This is being blown out of proportion, she said. We were trying to help her manage things while she's vulnerable. Rebecca tilted her head slightly. And did Mrs. Barrett request that assistance, she asked. Lauren hesitated. Well, not explicitly, she admitted. Rebecca nodded. That distinction matters. The room fell quiet again. I could feel it, the shift. The balance of control moving away from Lauren and Kevin back toward me. Rebecca turned back to me. Mrs. Barrett, she said gently, you have the right to review, accept, or decline any document presented to you. You also have the right to request independent legal counsel before making any decisions that affect your finances or property. I understand, I said. And you are under no obligation to sign anything today, she continued. I nodded again. That won't be happening, I said. Lauren's breath caught. Mom. No, I said, softly but firmly. Not like this. That was the first time I had cut her off, and we both felt it. Rebecca made a small note in her folder, then continued. I'm also required to document this situation, she said, particularly the presence of external documents involving financial authority. Kevin exhaled sharply. So now this goes on some kind of record, he asked. Yes, Rebecca said. For the patient's protection. Kevin's jaw tightened. This is exactly what we were trying to avoid, he muttered. Daniel glanced at him. Transparency tends to do that, he said. Lauren closed her eyes briefly, pressing her lips together, as if trying to hold back something emotion words regret. I couldn't tell. When she opened them again, she looked at me. And this time, there was no performance left, just exhaustion. We didn't think it would go like this, she said quietly. I studied her. No, I replied. You didn't think I would question it. She didn't deny it. Kevin stepped forward again, his tone shifting less defensive, more urgent. Look, he said we're not the villains here. We're trying to stay afloat. Things got out of hand. We needed a solution. And you chose one that didn't require my consent, I said. We were going to explain it, he insisted. When I asked, he didn't answer, because there was no good answer. Rebecca closed her folder gently. At this point, she said my recommendation is that all documents be set aside until they can be properly reviewed in a neutral setting. That's already happening, Daniel added. Kevin looked between them, frustration building again. So what are we supposed to do now? He asked. Rebecca's tone remained even. You handle your financial situation independently, she said, without involving Mrs. Barrett unless she chooses to participate fully informed. Lauren's shoulders sagged slightly. That was the moment it hit her. Not just that the plan had failed, but that the option itself was gone. Completely. I watched her, feeling something complicated settle in my chest. Not triumph, not anger, something quieter, sadness. Because no matter what had just happened, she was still my daughter. Lauren, I said softly. She looked up. and for a moment she looked like the girl I remembered. "What you're going through," I continued. "It's hard. I can see that." Her eyes filled this time with something closer to tears. "But what you tried to do—" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "That crossed a line." She nodded faintly. "I know," she whispered. Kevin turned toward her, surprised. "Lauren." "No," she said, shaking her head. "She's right. That surprised all of us. Even me." "I didn't want to admit it," she continued, "but we were desperate. And I thought if it was temporary, if we could fix everything before it got worse, then maybe it wouldn't matter how we got there." She swallowed hard. "But it does," she added. Silence followed. A different kind this time. Less tense. More real. Rebecca nodded slightly. "Recognizing that is an important step," she said. Kevin didn't look convinced. He ran a hand over his face, clearly struggling between frustration and reality. "This isn't over," he muttered. "No," Daniel said. "But it's no longer her burden to solve." Kevin didn't respond. Because again, there was nothing left to argue. I leaned back slightly against the pillows, my body still tired, but my mind clearer than it had been all day. For the first time since I had fallen in my kitchen, I felt steady. Not because everything was fixed, but because I finally understood what I was standing on. Myself. The room slowly emptied of urgency, but not of consequence. Rebecca stepped out to finalize her report, and Marlene followed to coordinate with the charge nurse. For the first time since the morning, the hum of the hospital returned, monitors beeping softly, a cart rolling past in the hallway, voices drifting in and out like distant waves. But inside that room, everything had changed. Daniel remained by my side, one hand resting lightly on the bed rail, not in control, not directing, just present. A steady anchor in a day that had tried to pull me under. Lauren stood near the window, her back partially turned, staring out at the parking lot as if she were trying to find a version of herself that still made sense. Kevin lingered by the door, restless, tapping his thumb against his phone without actually using it. No one spoke for a while. Then Daniel broke the silence. "Esther," he said gently, "there's something we need to do next. Not urgently, but carefully." I turned my head toward him. "What is it?" "We make your position official," he said. "In writing. Here. Today." Kevin looked up sharply. Official in what sense? Daniel didn't look at him. "In the sense that Mrs. Barrett is fully competent, aware, and declines to grant any form of financial authority," he replied. "We document it properly with witnesses." Lauren turned around slowly. "That's not necessary," she said. Daniel met her gaze this time. "It is," he said calmly. "Because right now there are already documents in this room that suggest otherwise." Her shoulders tensed again. "But she hasn't signed anything she said." "That's precisely why we act now," Daniel replied. "To ensure no ambiguity exists moving forward." I felt a strange sense of clarity settle over me. All day I had been reacting. Now I was choosing. "Yes," I said. "Let's do that." Lauren's lips parted slightly. "Mom." I didn't look away from Daniel. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "A simple statement," he said. "In your own words. That you understand the documents presented, that you decline them, and that you do not authorize anyone to act on your behalf financially or legally at this time." I nodded. "That's easy enough." Kevin stepped forward again, tension returning to his posture. "You're overcorrecting," he said. "There's no need to make this permanent." Daniel turned to him. "It's not permanent," he said. "It's clear." Kevin's jaw tightened. And what happens if something actually goes wrong? He pressed. If she can't make decisions later, then we address that when and if it happens, Daniel replied, with proper medical evaluation and legal oversight, not preemptively under pressure. Kevin exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. This is exactly what I was afraid of, he muttered. What I asked. He looked at me. That everything would slow down, he said. I almost smiled. That's the point, I replied. Lauren closed her eyes briefly. We're running out of time, she said softly. For what I asked. She hesitated. Then quietly, the loan. There it was again, always circling back to that. I studied her face. You should have come to me, I said. I know, she whispered. But you didn't trust me, I continued. You trusted a plan instead. Her eyes filled again, but this time she didn't try to hide it. Daniel stepped slightly closer to me, lowering his voice just enough to keep it private. There's something else I recommend, he said. What I asked. We update your emergency contact and access permissions, he said, immediately. My breath stilled for a moment. That felt heavier, more final. You mean, remove Lauren, I asked. I mean, adjust your records to reflect your current wishes. He replied carefully. I understood what he was really saying. And I understood why. I looked at Lauren. She was watching me now. Really watching me, her expression fragile, uncertain. For the first time all day, she wasn't trying to control anything. She was waiting to see what I would do. And that made it harder, much harder than saying no to a piece of paper, because this wasn't about ink or signatures anymore. This was about boundaries, about trust, about deciding how much of my life I could still safely place in her hands. I'm not removing you, I said slowly. Relief flickered across her face, but I continued. I am changing how access works. That flicker disappeared. I don't want anyone making decisions for me unless I explicitly ask for it, I said. Not now. Not based on assumptions. She nodded faintly. I understand, she said, and this time, I believed that she meant it. Daniel gave a small approving nod. That's a reasonable approach, he said. Kevin didn't look satisfied, but he didn't argue, because the direction of things had already shifted too far. Rebecca returned a few minutes later, followed by another staff member carrying a clipboard. We're ready whenever you are, she said. Daniel stepped aside slightly. Go ahead, Esther, he said. I took a slow breath. My body still felt weak, but my voice didn't. My name is Esther Barrett. I began looking at Rebecca as she prepared to document my words. I am fully aware of the documents that were presented to me today. I have reviewed them, and I do not consent to signing any of them. I do not authorize any individual to access or manage my financial or legal affairs at this time. The words came easier than I expected. Clear, certain. I am capable of making my own decisions, I added, and I choose to do so. Rebecca nodded as she wrote. Thank you, she said. That's very clear. The other staff member signed as a witness. Daniel added his name shortly after. Marlene stood quietly near the door, her expression calm, but there was something in her eyes. Pride. Not for herself. For me. I felt it too. Not pride exactly, but something close, something steady, something earned. Lauren stood still, watching the entire process. When it was done, she didn't speak right away. Then quietly she said, I didn't think it would come to this. I looked at her. It didn't have to, I replied. Kevin turned away, pacing once across the room before stopping near the door again. "This isn't over," he said under his breath. Daniel didn't respond. Neither did I. Because for me, this part was over. The part where I didn't know what was happening. The part where I felt uncertain. That part was gone. And in its place was something stronger, something quieter. Control, my control. The signatures dried quickly. Ink on paper, simple, ordinary, and yet it felt like the most important line I had drawn in years. Rebecca reviewed the statement once more, then closed her folder with a soft, decisive snap. "This will be added to your record, Mrs. Barrett," she said. "It clarifies your wishes and your capacity at this time." "Thank you," I replied. Marlene gave me a small nod from near the door, her eyes warm but alert. Daniel remained beside me, calm as ever, but I could sense a quiet vigilance in him, as if he knew we weren't entirely finished yet. Because we weren't. Lauren hadn't moved since I spoke those words. She stood there, hands clasped together. Now her shoulders no longer tense in the same rigid way, but not relaxed either. It was something else. Something uncertain. Something like a person standing in the aftermath of their own decisions. Kevin, on the other hand, hadn't settled at all. He paced once more, slower this time, then stopped and turned toward us. "So that's it," he said. "We just pretend none of this happened." No one answered right away, because none of us believed that. Daniel finally spoke. "No," he said. "We acknowledge what happened, and we move forward accordingly." Kevin let out a humorless breath. "That's easy for you to say." "It's not easy," Daniel replied. "It's necessary." Kevin shook his head, clearly frustrated. "You don't understand what we're dealing with," he said again, his voice sharper now. "This isn't just a mistake we can walk away from." I looked at him. "What exactly are you afraid of?" I asked. He hesitated. Lauren closed her eyes briefly, then spoke before he could. "Collection," she said quietly. "Legal action. Possibly liens." The word liens hit harder than I expected. On what I already knew the answer. On my house, I asked. Lauren didn't respond. Kevin did. "If things escalate," he said carefully, "they could come after anything tied to our financial network." "Which includes me," I said. He didn't deny it. A cold realization settled deeper into my chest. This hadn't just been about quick money. It had been about protection from consequences they had already set in motion. "Did you use my name?" I asked. Lauren's eyes snapped open. "Not directly," she said quickly. "That's not what I asked," I replied. Silence. Kevin looked at her again, that same quick, sharp glance from earlier. A silent warning. But this time, it was too late. Lauren swallowed. "We listed you as a reference," she said, "for what I pressed. For credibility," she admitted. "For the loan." My fingers tightened slightly against the blanket. Without asking me, I said, "We didn't think it would matter," she whispered. "It matters," I said. The room went quiet again. Not tense this time. Heavy. Because this wasn't just about intention anymore. This was about impact. Daniel stepped forward slightly. "Did you sign anything on her behalf?" he asked. Kevin answered quickly. "No." Lauren hesitated. That hesitation said everything. Lauren Daniel said, his voice still calm but now unmistakably firm. "Did you sign anything using your mother's name?" Her eyes filled again. I may have signed one document," she said quietly. My breath caught. 1, I repeated. It was just preliminary, she said quickly. Not finalized. It was to move things forward while we figured out how to fix everything. My heart sank. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was a decision. You forged my signature, I said. She flinched at the word. I didn't think of it that way, she said. But it is that way, Daniel said. Kevin stepped in immediately. Let's not escalate this, he said. It was a mistake. It doesn't have to become something bigger. It already is something bigger, Daniel replied. Forgery is not a minor issue. Lauren shook her head, panic creeping into her voice. I didn't do it to hurt you, she said, looking at me. I was trying to buy time. At my expense, I said softly. No. Yes, I interrupted gently. At my expense. Tears welled in her eyes, now finally breaking through. I didn't know what else to do, she whispered. I believed that, but belief didn't erase consequence. Marlene stepped forward slightly, her presence steady. We need to document that as well, she said quietly to Rebecca. Rebecca nodded, already opening her folder again. Kevin's frustration snapped. This is exactly what I was trying to avoid, he said. You're turning this into a legal case. No, Daniel said calmly. The actions already did that. Kevin ran a hand over his face, exhaling sharply. Lauren stood, frozen tears now slipping down her cheeks, though she made no move to wipe them away. For a moment, I saw her again. Not as the person who had just tried to take control of my life, but as my daughter, lost, afraid, and very, very wrong. I would have helped you, I said again, my voice softer now. She nodded weakly. I know, she whispered, but you chose not to ask. I continued. I was ashamed, she said. That I understood. Too well. Shame has a way of turning people away from the very help they need, but it also doesn't justify the path they take instead. I can't undo what I did, she said. No, I replied. You can't. Another silence. Then Kevin spoke again, quieter now. So what happens next? He asked. Daniel didn't hesitate. We separate responsibilities, he said. Immediately. He looked at me. Esther, I strongly recommend you review your financial accounts, update your security access, and place temporary monitoring on any activity connected to your name. I nodded. That makes sense. Lauren looked up, panic flickering again. You don't have to do that, she said. I would never... I know what you would never do, I said gently. And I also know what you already have. That stopped her. Completely. Daniel continued. We'll also need to assess the document that was signed, he said. If your name was used without authorization, we may need to formally dispute it. Kevin stiffened. That's not necessary, he said quickly. It may be, Daniel replied. The weight of that hung in the air. Lauren looked between us, her breathing uneven. I don't want this to turn into something legal, she said. I looked at her. Then you should have made a different choice, I said quietly. The truth settled between us. Unavoidable. Final. For the first time that day, no one argued with it. No one rushed to fill the silence this time. There was nothing left to soften, nothing left to reinterpret. The truth had already been spoken, and it sat between us, solid, undeniable. Lauren stood motionless, her tears slowing but not stopping. Kevin had gone quiet too, though I could still see the tension in the way his shoulders held, like he was bracing for something worse to come. Daniel adjusted the papers on the table, organizing them into a neat stack again, not out of habit, but with intention.
"Let's be very clear about where things stand,"
he said. His voice wasn't raised, but it carried weight. Lauren lifted her head slightly as if she were forcing herself to listen. First, Daniel continued, "Mrs. Barrett has declined all documents presented today. That decision is now recorded and witnessed." Rebecca nodded, making another note. Second, he went on, there is an admission that a document may have been signed using Mrs. Barrett's name without her authorization. That needs to be addressed immediately. Lauren's breathing caught again. "I said I might have." "You said you signed?" Daniel replied gently but firmly. "We need to work with that truth." Kevin stepped forward again, trying to regain some ground. "It wasn't finalized," he said. "Nothing was actually executed." "That depends on how the document was processed," Daniel said. "Even preliminary submissions can create legal exposure." The word exposure seemed to hit Kevin harder than anything else. His posture shifted, less defensive, now more cautious. "What kind of exposure?" he asked. Daniel met his gaze. "Potential liability," he said. "Fraud, misrepresentation, unauthorized use of identity. It depends on how far the document traveled." Lauren shook her head quickly, panic returning. "I didn't submit anything fully processed," she said. "It was just to move things forward. It wasn't supposed to go that far, but it might have," Daniel said. That was the problem. Not what she intended, but what she had already set in motion. I felt my chest tighten, not with fear, but with something heavier. Reality. "Do you know where the document is now?" I asked. Lauren hesitated, wiping her cheek with the back of her hand. "It was part of the loan application file," she said quietly. "With whom?" Daniel asked. "A private lender," Kevin answered this time. "Short-term financing, high interest." Daniel's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened. "Those are often the least forgiving," he said. Kevin didn't argue, because he knew. I looked at Lauren again. "And you used my name to support that application," I said. She nodded faintly. "Yes." No more hesitation. No more deflection. Just truth. And somehow that made it both easier and harder. Did they verify anything Daniel asked? Kevin shook his head. "Not yet. It was still under review." "That gives us a window," Daniel said. "A window for what I asked?" "To correct the record," he replied. Rebecca looked up from her notes. "That would involve formal notification," she added. "Documenting that Mrs. Barrett did not authorize any participation in that application." Lauren's breath hitched. "That will destroy everything," she said softly. I looked at her. "What exactly is everything?" I asked. She hesitated, then answered, "Any chance we had to fix this." There it was again. That belief, that if they could just get through this moment, everything would be okay. But life doesn't work like that, not when the foundation is built on something unstable. "Lauren," I said gently, "you can't fix something by building it on something that isn't true." Her eyes filled again. "I know," she whispered. Kevin exhaled, sharply rubbing his face. "This is spiraling," he said. "We're making it worse." "No," Daniel replied calmly. "We're making it accurate." Accuracy. It doesn't always feel like relief. Sometimes it feels like loss. Marlene stepped closer to the bed again, her presence quiet but steady. "You did the right thing," she said to me softly. I nodded, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like clarity, and clarity has weight. Rebecca closed her folder again. "I'll prepare the necessary documentation for the hospital record," she said. and I recommend you proceed with legal notification as soon as possible." Daniel nodded. "I will." Lauren looked between us, her voice trembling now. "Do we have to do that today?" she asked. Daniel met her gaze. "The sooner the better," he said. Kevin stepped in again. "Give us time," he said. "We can handle this ourselves." Daniel shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "This is no longer something you can manage privately. It involves someone else's identity." That ended that argument. Lauren sank slowly into the chair by the window, her strength finally giving way. "I didn't think it would go this far," she said again. I believed her, but that didn't change where we were now. I shifted slightly in the bed, the movement reminding me that my body was still tired, still recovering. But my mind? My mind had never been clearer. "Lauren," I said softly. She looked up. "I'm not going to let this destroy you," I said. Her eyes widened slightly. "But I'm also not going to pretend it didn't happen," I added. She nodded slowly. "I understand." Kevin didn't look convinced. He still seemed caught between frustration and calculation, like he was searching for a way to regain control of something that had already slipped away. But there was no path back, not the one they had planned. Daniel placed a hand lightly on the table. "We're going to address this step by step," he said. "No shortcuts, no pressure." That word again. Pressure. It had driven everything that had happened, and now it was being removed. Lauren took a slow, shaky breath. "What do I do?" she asked. It was the first honest question she had asked all day. Not about strategy, not about outcomes, but about responsibility. Daniel answered. "You tell the truth," he said, "fully, to the lender, in writing." Her face paled, and then she asked. "Then you deal with whatever comes next," he said. "No sugarcoating, no easy solution. Just reality." Lauren nodded weakly. "I don't know if I can fix it," she said. "That's not the goal," I said quietly. She looked at me. "The goal is to stop making it worse," I continued. That settled into her, slowly, deeply, and for the first time, I saw something change. Not fear, not panic, but acceptance. It wasn't complete, not yet, but it had begun. Acceptance doesn't arrive all at once. It doesn't sweep in like relief or crash in like fear. It settles, slowly, piece by piece. And in that hospital room, I could see it beginning to settle over Lauren. Not fully, not comfortably, but undeniably. She sat in the chair by the window, her hands now resting in her lap instead of gripping her arms, her shoulders no longer braced for argument. Kevin had stopped pacing. Even he seemed to understand that whatever came next wasn't going to be solved with pressure or persuasion. Daniel stepped slightly aside, giving me space, but not distance. "Esther," he said quietly, "this is the point where you decide what happens next." I looked at him. "I thought we already did," I said. "You stopped something from happening," he replied. "Now you choose what to do about what already has." I understood what he meant. Stopping the signatures was one thing. Addressing the forgery was another. I turned my head toward Lauren. She met my gaze immediately. There was no defense in her eyes now, no argument, just waiting. Waiting for me to decide how much of a line had been crossed and what I was going to do about it. "Do you understand what you did?" I asked her. Her throat moved as she swallowed. "Yes," she said. "Not, I think so. Not, I didn't mean to. Just, yes." "Say it," I said gently. Her eyes flickered. Mom. Say it, I repeated, still calm. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. I signed a document using your name without your permission, she said, and I tried to get you to sign papers you didn't fully understand so I could control your finances. The words sounded different out loud, heavier, more real. Even Kevin looked at her differently after she said them. I nodded slowly. That's the truth, I said. She nodded. Yes. Another silence. Then Daniel spoke. With that acknowledgement, he said, we have two paths. Lauren's head lifted slightly. What paths, she asked. One, he said, we formally report the unauthorized signature and proceed with legal protection measures. That could involve an investigation. Her face went pale. And the other, she asked. The other, he continued, is that we still correct the document with the lender, but we handle the matter privately without initiating formal charges, provided there is full cooperation and no further risk. The room stilled again. Even the faint sounds from the hallway seemed to fade, because now, this was the real decision. Not about paper, not about signatures, but about consequence. Lauren looked at me. Tears filled her eyes again, but she didn't look away this time. I'll do whatever you decide, she said. I believed her, and that made it harder, much harder. Kevin stepped forward slightly, his voice lower now. We didn't come here to hurt you, he said. I turned my gaze to him. No, I said. You came here to fix something. You just didn't care how. He didn't argue, because he couldn't. I looked back at Lauren, at my daughter, the little girl who used to run into my arms after school, the teenager who once cried over a broken friendship, the woman who now sat in front of me after crossing a line she couldn't uncross, and I realized something. Punishment wasn't what I wanted, but neither was pretending this hadn't happened. I'm not going to press charges, I said. The words left my mouth slowly, carefully. Lauren's breath caught. Kevin exhaled sharply, relief flashing across his face before he could hide it. But I wasn't finished. But I continued, that doesn't mean this disappears. Lauren nodded quickly. I know, she said. You will correct the document I said. In writing. Today. I will, she replied. You will tell them the truth, I added. Completely. Her voice trembled. Yes. And you will not use my name, my identity for anything again without asking me first, I said. I won't, she said. I promise. Promises. They used to mean everything. Now, they meant something different. Not certainty, but intention. And intention would have to be enough for now. Daniel nodded slightly. That's a reasonable resolution, he said. Rebecca added. We'll still document today's events in the hospital record. That's fine, I said, because I understood now documentation wasn't punishment. It was protection. Marlene stepped closer, her voice gentle. You handled that well, she said. I gave her a small, tired smile. I didn't feel like I had a choice, I admitted. You always have a choice, she said softly. You just made one. I let that settle. Because she was right. For most of the day, I had felt like things were happening to me. Now, I had acted. Lauren stood slowly from the chair. She took a step toward me, then stopped, as if unsure whether she still had the right to come closer. Mom, she said quietly. I looked at her. I'm sorry, she said. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rehearsed. It was simple and real. I know I said. She nodded faintly. I don't expect you to trust me right away, she added. That's good, I said. She looked at me surprised. Because I won't, I continued. Not right away. The truth landed between us. Not cruel, not harsh, just honest. But that doesn't mean it can't be rebuilt, I added. Her eyes filled again. This time she didn't look away. Kevin remained quiet. For once he had nothing to say, because this wasn't something he could manage, or fix, or negotiate. This was between a mother and her daughter. And it would take time, real time, not the rushed kind they had tried to force earlier. The door opened again, and Rebecca stepped out to finalize her report. Daniel gathered his things, then looked at me. I'll follow up on the lender issue, he said. We'll make sure your name is cleared. Thank you, I said. He nodded once. Marlene lingered near the door, giving me one last reassuring look before stepping out as well. And then, it was just us. The three of us, in a room that felt very different from the one we had walked into. Lauren stood there uncertain. Kevin stood behind her quieter than before. And I lay in the bed no longer confused, no longer uncertain, just clear. Clear about what had happened, and clear about what would come next. Not punishment, not revenge, but something harder, something slower, something real. Rebuilding. If it was even possible. After they left, the room felt too large. Hospitals have a way of doing that, of stretching time and space until everything echoes. The beeping monitor sounded louder. The fluorescent lights felt harsher. Even the blanket over my legs seemed heavier, as if it were reminding me that my body had not yet caught up with my mind. I lay back slowly, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything that had happened. The fall. The papers. The pen. Lauren's voice in the hallway. Kevin's calm explanations. Daniel's steady presence. Marlene's whisper. It all felt like a single long moment that had somehow stretched into an entire day. There was a knock on the door, soft this time. Marlene stepped in. Thought you might want some tea, she said, holding up a small paper cup. I smiled faintly. You read minds now? She shrugged lightly. Comes with the job. She set the cup on the tray beside me and pulled the chair closer, sitting down, not as a nurse this time, but as someone choosing to stay. How are you holding up? She asked. I let out a slow breath. I think I'm still catching up, I said. That makes sense, she replied. It was a lot. We sat in silence for a moment. Not uncomfortable, just quiet. Then I said, if you hadn't been here. She shook her head gently. You saw it too, she said. I just helped you trust it. I looked at her. Not everyone would have, I said. Her expression shifted slightly, something deeper, something personal. My mother didn't, she said quietly. I didn't ask her to explain. She continued anyway. She signed something she didn't understand, Marlene said. My brother brought it to her, said it was for her care. Turned out it gave him control over everything. I felt a chill. What happened? I asked softly. She lost her house, Marlene said. Her savings, everything she had built over her life. And by the time we realized what was happening, it was already legal. The word hung in the air. Legal. Not right. Just legal. I couldn't stop it, she added, but I promised myself I'd never ignore that feeling again, not when I saw it happening to someone else. I reached out slightly, resting my hand over hers. Thank you, I said. She gave a small nod. You did the hard part, she said. You said no. I looked down at my hands. It hadn't felt like strength in the moment. It had felt like necessity, but now it felt like something else, something steadier. I think I've been saying yes too easily, I admitted. Marlene tilted her head slightly. To Lauren, she asked. I nodded. She's my daughter, I said. You spend a lifetime putting someone first, and then one day, you realize you never taught them where the boundary is. That's not entirely on you, Marlene said gently. Maybe not, I replied, but I let it go on longer than I should have. She didn't argue, because sometimes acknowledgement is enough. After a while she stood. I'll let you rest, she said. The doctor should be in soon. Will you be back? I asked. She smiled. I'm on shift until tonight, she said. So, yes. I nodded. Good, she paused at the door, then added. And Esther? Yes, you're not alone in this anymore. The door closed softly behind her. I sat there for a long moment, letting those words settle. Not alone. For years I had told myself I was fine on my own. Independent. Self-sufficient. Strong. And I was, but that didn't mean I had to face everything by myself. The thought stayed with me as the afternoon passed. Daniel returned briefly to update me he had already begun contacting the lender, initiating the process to formally remove my name from any associated documents. He spoke in calm, measured terms, outlining steps, timelines, contingencies. It grounded me, gave structure to something that had felt chaotic. Before he left, he placed a folder on the table. These are your current estate documents, he said. When you're ready, we should review them. I nodded. I think I am, I said. That surprised even me. But it was true. Because now I understood something I hadn't fully faced before. Preparation isn't about expecting the worst. It's about protecting what matters. After he left, I opened the folder slowly. Inside were the documents Harold and I had put together years ago, carefully, thoughtfully. At the time, it had felt like planning for something distant, abstract. Now, it felt immediate, real. I flipped through the pages, stopping at the section listing emergency contacts and decision makers. Lauren's name was there. Of course it was. For a long time, I had never questioned that. Why would I? She was my daughter. But now, I saw it differently. Not as a guarantee, but as a responsibility. One that required trust. And trust, I realized, wasn't something automatic. It was something maintained, or lost. I closed the folder gently, not with anger, not with regret, just awareness. Later that evening, I was discharged. The doctor said it had likely been a temporary drop in blood pressure, nothing serious, but enough to warrant caution. Take it easy for a few days, he said, and make sure someone checks in on you. I almost smiled at that. Someone. The word felt different now. Lauren had offered to drive me home. I declined. Not out of spite, not out of anger, but because I needed space. Daniel arranged a car service instead. As I stepped outside the hospital, the evening air felt cool and grounding against my skin. For the first time all day, I felt steady, not just physically, but inside. The drive home was quiet, the kind of quiet that allows thoughts to settle into place. Not all of them were easy, but they were clear. When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked exactly as I had left it that morning. Still, familiar, unchanged. But I wasn't. I unlocked the door slowly and stepped inside. The scent of the kitchen tea wood, something warm and lived-in, wrapped around me. I set my bag down and stood there for a moment, just breathing, just being. Then I walked to the kitchen table and sat down, the same place where everything had started. Only now, I understood what I hadn't seen before. And I knew something with absolute certainty. No one would take control of my life again without my knowing, without my choosing, without my voice. The house felt different that first night. Not because anything had changed physically, everything was exactly where I had left it, but because I was finally seeing it clearly. Every object, every corner, every quiet space. It all belonged to me. Not just in name, not just on paper, but in understanding. I made myself a cup of tea the same way I had that morning, though my hands were steadier now. The kettle whistled, the steam curled upward, and for a moment I stood there watching it as if I were marking the distance between then and now. It hadn't even been a full day, and yet everything had shifted. I sat at the kitchen table, wrapping my hands around the warmth of the mug, letting the silence settle into something calm instead of heavy. There was no phone call from Lauren that night. I hadn't expected one. Some things take time not just to say, but to understand, and for the first time in a long while, I wasn't waiting for her to reach out. I was allowing space. For both of us. The next morning I woke early. Not out of habit, but because my mind was already moving. Clear, focused, ready. I made a list. It wasn't complicated, but it was deliberate. Call Daniel review all financial accounts, change passwords, update access permissions, schedule a full estate review. Each item represented something I had overlooked, not out of ignorance, but out of trust. And now I wasn't removing trust. I was redefining it. Daniel arrived mid-morning just as promised. He carried his usual leather briefcase, but this time he set it down more slowly, as if he understood that this wasn't just about paperwork.
How are you feeling?
He asked. Better, I said. Clearer. He nodded as if that was the answer he had been hoping for. We sat at the table together, spreading out documents, account summaries, access lists, authorizations I hadn't looked at in years. Nothing unusual has been processed yet, he said after reviewing the initial reports. That's a good sign. Relief came, but not fully, because now I understood something important. Damage doesn't always come from what happens. Sometimes it comes from what almost did. We updated everything carefully. No rush, no pressure. Every decision explained. Every step deliberate. When we reached the section listing authorized contacts, Daniel paused.
This is where you decide who has access moving forward,
he said. I looked at the paper. Lauren's name was still there. Of course it was. I didn't remove it, but I changed the level of access. Limited, conditional, requiring my direct approval. Daniel didn't comment. He simply nodded, because he understood trust wasn't gone. But it had boundaries now. 3 days passed before Lauren came to see me. She didn't call ahead. She didn't text. She simply stood at my front door, her hand hovering just above the bell. I saw her through the window before she rang, and for a moment, I just watched her. She looked different. Not physically, but in the way she held herself. Less certain, less guarded, more real. I opened the door. Neither of us spoke immediately. Hi, she said finally. Hi, I replied. She hesitated. I didn't know if you'd want to see me. I didn't know either, I said honestly. That seemed to settle something between us. I understand if you don't, she added. I didn't say that I replied. She nodded slightly. Then after a pause, can I come in? I stepped aside. Yes. We sat at the same kitchen table, the same place where everything had begun, only now there were no papers, no pens, no pressure, just two people, and the truth between them. I did what you said, she began quietly. I contacted the lender. I told them everything. I nodded. What happened, I asked. They pulled the application, she said, and they warned us about what legal consequences, she admitted. I studied her face. Are you in trouble? She hesitated. Not yet, she said. But we could have been. I nodded slowly. That matters, I said. She swallowed. I know. Silence followed, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one wasn't hiding anything, it was making room. For what it's worth, she said, her voice unsteady now, I've been thinking about what you said, about asking you instead of doing what I did. I didn't respond right away. I should have trusted you, she continued. Even if you said no. Yes, I said simply. She nodded, tears forming again. I was scared, she admitted, and I let that turn into something else. I looked at her. What I asked gently. Justification, she said. That word landed quietly, but deeply. I told myself it was temporary, she added, that I was helping, that it would all be okay in the end. And now I asked. She looked down at her hands. Now I know that's not how it works, she said. I nodded. Sometimes I said the way we do something matters more than why we do it. She looked up at me. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, she said. I don't, I replied. She nodded. I want a chance to do better. I sat with that. Really sat with it. Because this was the moment. Not about trust. Not yet. But about possibility. You can, I said. Her eyes filled again. But it's going to take time, I added. I know. And consistency, I said. I know. And honesty, I finished. She nodded. I know. We sat there for a while longer, not fixing everything, not pretending anything. Just beginning again. Carefully. Slowly. The way it should have been from the start. That evening after she left, I sat alone again at the kitchen table. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt quiet in a different way. A grounded way. I looked around the house, at the life I had built, at the choices I had made, at the lessons I had learned, some of them far too late. But not too late. Never too late. Because I was still here, still thinking, still choosing, still capable of protecting what mattered. And that was enough. There comes a point in life when love alone is not enough to protect us. We're taught to trust our children, to support them, to believe in them, even when things feel uncertain. And often that trust is deserved. But trust without awareness can become vulnerability, and love without boundaries can become permission. What happened to me wasn't just about documents or signatures. It was about something deeper. The quiet assumption that I would say yes simply because I always had before. That I wouldn't question. That I wouldn't stop and look closer. But here's what I've learned. Growing older does not mean growing weaker. It does not mean giving up control, and it certainly does not mean surrendering your voice. If something feels rushed, pause. If something feels unclear, ask. If something feels wrong, trust that feeling. Because your instincts are not accidents, they are experience speaking. And you have every right to protect your life, your choices, and your dignity, even from the people you love. Especially from the people you love. That doesn't mean shutting them out forever. It means teaching them how to respect you properly. If you've ever been in a situation where something didn't feel right, I want to hear your story. Where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Do you think Esther made the right decision? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of your own strength, don't forget to like and subscribe. Because sometimes the most important stories are the ones that help us protect ourselves.